and we believe that our state should be determining who is the next presidential candidate and who's the next presidential nominee.
But you are going to face that resistance from Iowa, New Hampshire, right? I mean, those types of states.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not blind to it, Tim. It was to the point where the voters there on the ground would look at me and they would say, if I've not met the presidential candidate myself, I'm not going to vote for them, or I'm not going to caucus for them. And I think that I want people in North Carolina to feel that type of power.
Hey, everybody, welcome into another edition of Time Together with Tim Boyum. I am Tim Boyum here with Mr. John McHugh, producer extraordinaire. And this week we are going to talk about primary politics, the 2028 election, just what everybody wanted while we're in the midst of the 2026 election. But, John, this is a fascinating conversation about where those first presidential primaries should be held and maybe North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those ideas that is, more forward thinking than I think the Democratic Party has been here in the past. And you'll see in the guest today, they have a pretty good case for it. And, there are some hurdles, which we will get to, but it's a pretty solid case.
Yeah. The biggest hurdle, they need help from Republicans.
Yeah. That's a tough one.
Yeah. So our guest today is Anderson Clayton. She is the chair of the Democratic Party. You've probably seen her on in the past. We've heard rumblings about this. They put in the official application. They have basically a job interview in May with the Democratic Party, and then selections will be made after that. Even after that happens, if they get approved and North Carolina is first, they need the legislature, who's run by Republicans, to basically approve it as well. And there's all kinds of other potential pitfalls. But as you'll hear from Anderson, she believes it's well worth the time and money that it could cost. So here is Anderson Clayton, whether or not Democratic Party could be the first place, North Carolina, to host the primaries, the presidential primaries in 2028. Anderson Clayton, it's good to see you. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm good, thank you. Before we started rolling, we talked about behind you. If people doubt that you're North Carolinian, behind you is evidence of that. For those that don't know, this is tobacco world, and your family, I guess, has part of this, right?
Yeah, the picture above me is the family farm that my dad grew up on when he was on a tobacco farm. And so him and his brothers and his sister, honestly, did from sun up to sundown is what he used to say. So when people look at me and they go, where'd you get your hard work from? I get to tell them Mark Clayton. So
yeah, and for those new to the state, if you don't know hard work, tobacco work is as hard as it gets, especially in the hot temperatures. Roy Cooper could tell you about that. All of the past leaders, they've all known about that. Before we get to the primary stuff, I do have to ask you about something on social media. John Stamos, where did that come from?
I had the chance to do a luncheon in California, and when we did the DNC meeting that happened out in LA, and his wife, Caitlin, is phenomenal and actually graduated from School of the Arts in North Carolina. And so she is very passionate about making sure that our democracy survives. And so she's got family in Charlotte, and we got to do a meet and greet with her and him. And it was just a good time. One of my precinct chairs looked at him and she said, I've had your poster on my locker when I was in high school. And so it was a full house. We had a great time.
I was going to ask, did people resist talking to him about Full House or no?
No, they went full in. And he's also here in Charlotte filming season 2 of The Hunting Wives right now. And so we're excited and thankful for the opportunities that our good old Governor Josh Stein has given the movie industry to come to North Carolina again.
When he's a big Disney guy. In fact, I saw him in person at Brown Derby in Hollywood Studios. And I didn't bother him because he was on the phone, but I saw him at Disney World. So,
well, it means you got to come to a Democratic Party event sometime, Tim. You never know who will pop up.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It was funny to see that pop up, so I had to ask about that. Okay, all right. So let's talk about this primary with Democrats. Take us behind the scenes about how, from your perspective, about how North Carolina and y'all got involved in this and how this all came about.
I mean, really what we're interested in is moving North Carolina up because we believe that North Carolina has a voice right now that is extremely important, not only to the state itself, but to the nation. And we believe that our state should be determining who is the next presidential candidate and who's the next presidential nominee from both political parties in the state, hopefully.
So does that start with just kind of putting the name in the hat from like you as party chair? Is that, and the party's just going through a process of elimination?
Absolutely. So the DNC started or released the process. The Rules and Bylaws Committee for the DNC released the process early last November and really tried to make it so that the states had a window of time to be able to apply to just say, we're interested. So they submitted an RFP. 12 states across the country submitted one, and North Carolina was also one of those. We made it through the first round. So the RBC met at the DNC winter meeting in January or at the end of January. And we're going to see what that process plays out like in May when we get to go up before them and present why we believe North Carolina should be one of those first in four states and hopefully the first in the nation state.
And they'll likely make that decision this summer then, right?
They will. They have, by the latest, it should be September when they make it. We know that we've got a long road in the state to play, especially trying to make the case to our state legislature about why it would be important, both economically and advantageous for North Carolina voters to have their voices heard like this in the process. But we also have the case to make at the DNC. And so we're not blind to the uphill battle that we have, but we believe North Carolina is a state that's worth fighting for, especially in this regard.
So when you say uphill battle, do you mean because of challenges that you might face in North Carolina or with the DNC?
I mean, it's the first time we've ever applied, right? So it's a new state to the process. You already have sort of states that I think have a basis for being there. And I think that that's also a hard fought battle that we're going to have. I also think, convincing Republicans that this would be a good idea economically for North Carolina. There was a statistic that came out about New Hampshire being one of the first in early states that from the 2000s primary, New Hampshire brought in almost $71 million for tourism and people that traveled to the state in that time frame for the primaries. And I think that we have to look at this as saying North Carolina just getting the mention alone nationally right now, it's going to bring more eyes on the state. It's going to put more tourism into the state, and it's going to make it a place where it's not only number one in business, but maybe number one in tourism too across the country.
Do you think for Democrats, this is a battle between tradition versus kind of more important states currently or more representative states? Is that sort of the decision-making process you think they have?
No, I think it's a battle for who can you see the future of the Democratic Party running through. And I think that North Carolina has the best case to make for that. We're not a 2-year strategy, we're a 20-year strategy. And that's the fact that North Carolina is the third fastest growing state in the country right now. After the census, when you look at us, we're going to be gaining a congressional seat after 2030's time frame. And the only other states that are also going to garner that are Texas and Florida, both states that didn't apply to be in the early window. And I also think that for Republicans, the advantage here is that you're not going to be able to win the presidency without winning North Carolina. We've seen that time and time again for their political party. And it's better bang for your buck to be spending early in that state that you need to win in that November election cycle, especially for the primary time frame that we would be in.
But you are going to face that resistance from Iowa, New Hampshire, right? I mean, those types of states.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not blind to it, Tim, of that. We definitely are going to have pushback. But again, it's the Rules and Bylaws Committee that we've got to make the case to, not the individual states that have also applied with us about why we should be first in the nation. And I really think that North Carolina in 2028, we have 22 statewide races on our ballot. We have the most statewide races of any state in the entire country. That will also determine 3 state Supreme Court seats that will end up with the balance of power of our state Supreme Court in either Democratic or Republican controlled hands. And I think that the entire nation, both political parties nationally, should care about that, because that also is going to be helpful to the control of Congress one day too. When you look at what partisan and racial gerrymandering has done in North Carolina, we saw just this last year, right? Phil Berger and Destin Hall being willing to sell out a congressional seat to the president just because he asked for one. And I think that that's what we're going to continue to see in North Carolina unless we're able to stop it. And I think that's what all eyes on the nation are going to look at for our state in both 28 and beyond.
In your organizing days, well, you're still organizing, but in when you were in a chair, you worked, was Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris both in Iowa?
Yeah, I understand the benefit to the state.
Well, I don't mean the benefit. I'm actually looking more on the inside about what, for our viewers, about what it's like to be a first in state, like how it would be, how you think it might be different.
Money and also time and energy and resources. North Carolina thinks that we get a lot of surrogate visits now. Iowa was a completely different ground game. And it was to the point where the voters there on the ground would look at me and they would say, if I've not met the presidential candidate myself, I'm not going to vote for them, or I'm not going to caucus for them. And I think that I want people in North Carolina to feel that type of power when you're talking about the highest office in the land. And one thing that we got to see was a ground game from every presidential candidate. They had more resources in that that state than any other. They had events, and it was a really country politicking way to go out and meet candidates. And that's again for both political parties. And I think what's interesting about it is it brings back the sort of retail politics that North Carolina favors a lot, but we oftentimes miss because media has made politics so nationalized, and also I think so on your phone versus in your face.
Yeah, and you're likely going to have, I mean, there could be a dozen candidates that be coming to this state just on the Democratic side, right? I mean, is that your expectation that there's going to be a long list?
Absolutely. And I'm hoping it's really long because we want all of them through North Carolina and every part of the state, helping tell folks about why it's important to get out and vote. And I think that also for Republicans, that advantage is going to be, your next up nominee, who's their potential vice president right at that point in time, is going to need North Carolina to be able to win the presidency. So the early advantage that we're giving both sides, I think here is just giving more voters in North Carolina the power to be able to have a national voice.
For those that haven't paid attention closely, remind me again who you're competing against for this.
So it's a large list. It's about 12 states, but really when you look at it, South Carolina, Iowa, New Hampshire, New Mexico, and also Nevada have been in that mix quite a bit too recently, and Georgia as well as one of the southern states that has applied. They're going to choose one state from each region, and so we're really hopeful we can make the best case that North Carolina, both with the diverse rural communities that we have in it and also our urban centers that really are a good combination, I think, and representative of America in so many senses, is the case to make for why we should be one of the first.
So really, the immediate competition is Georgia, essentially, in May. Is that?
Georgia, South Carolina.
Oh, yeah,
and
South Carolina.
I mean, all of my southern states that have applied. So we have only one of us is necessarily going to make it out of that. It's not that they couldn't have more than one, though, of the southern states that make it in. They've talked about doing more than 4 states and maybe 5. I'm not trying to diss any of my other states in that category.
We're going to diss them. It's time.
I just think that North Carolina, in the fact when you're talking about 22 statewide races and the fact that we help control who's going to win the presidency, North Carolina is the most important state to be investing in 2026 for us and in 2028.
Georgia and North Carolina, they'll probably have somewhat of a similar profile, right? I mean, not just what's on the election, but the states and the influence. We've kind of tried to battle back and forth about who is the most swingiest state in the Southeast in particular. I mean, South Carolina, I feel like some people, with Biden essentially handpicking them in the past, I feel like some people want to move on from South Carolina. It's not representative. But is Georgia do you feel them as like, Nashville, for instance, is an economic, rival, but Georgia seems to be sort of a political rival for Democrats. Is that fair?
I mean, I think that one thing that's different, though, with North Carolina and Georgia is that a lot of your population for Georgia is in a major metro area of Atlanta. And North Carolina is unique in the fact that we have major, diverse, both urban and rural communities that enable us to be able to have, the whole point of being one of the first in the 4 states is to be able to test the presidential nominee. And I think that North Carolina having such a diverse community across our state is really what would be able to do that. And it would also help us be able as a party to not only look at how do you win back places like Iowa and Ohio again, but it's also using what we learn in North Carolina to take that into other states. North Carolina has the second highest rural population of any state in the country other than Texas. And the fact is that our majority minority communities make up a good portion of that. So the 20 majority minority counties that we have in the state, of those, 18 of them are rural. And it means that you would be having to talk to rural Black voters in a way that you would not be in a state like Georgia, in my opinion. And I think that also enables us to really play for other states in the future, because we're going to have to get into the South. The Democratic Party can't ignore it any longer.
You mentioned the first 4 states. So is it all or nothing for you to be the top state, or is this like trying to get into just being the top 4?
I'm trying to get into the club, Tim. So if I could be in the top 4, I would be 100% fine. I even mentioned, I said, man, a Carolina's primary would save a lot of money and resources for a nominee if they were to put South Carolina and North Carolina on the same day. I'm here to be at the negotiating table if they let me at it, but I got to get there first,
I think that's the little headline we have. I just want to get in the club, Tim.
I do. I just want to get in the club. Like, North Carolina is, and what was funny is people were talking about our application or our RFP that we made, and they said, man, North Carolina's was 12 pages, Anderson. We had other states like Iowa's was almost 96. And I said, yeah, well, that's what happens when you can recycle applications year after or cycle after cycle. North Carolina, this is our first time doing this. And I think that at least it throws the gauntlet down and says, hey, we're not going to be ignored any longer as a state and for the national DNC as part of this process. And also in the future, North Carolina had a $3 million legal fight that we went through for our Supreme Court justice fight after the 2024 election cycle that I know you're very well familiar, Tim. But for anyone that's listening to this, we had the last uncertified race of 2024 with our Supreme Court justice fight. And North Carolina had to carry, and Justice Riggs carried that fight on our backs. And we did not get national support from the DNC to help us fund that lawsuit. And I think it's really important for people to understand this is trying to put us in the perspective of saying we are important to a national party and we need to be taken seriously. And whether it works out this year or it's something that we're able to push forward in 2032, we're going to keep at it because I think that the resources, North Carolina deserves them more than any state.
Well, and I remember you telling me several times, and it wasn't just to me, but when you became chair, it was not a one-term plan. It was a 10-year plan. So is that kind of what this is too? Just notice that, hey, we're here and we're not going away, even if it's not 28.
Absolutely. It keeps me, national media right now, Tim, when they're talking about the rest of those states that have always been early states, they're mentioning North Carolina now. And I want that to continue because I think that more often than not, people are going to wake up and they're going to understand that this state has so much power to give if we get the right investment and the right resources here to be able to do it. And I think that that's my job as a state party chair is to try to bring that to our party and try to bring that to voters in North Carolina because they're powerful people and they should feel like that every step of the way.
Do you think that helps you win North Carolina too, if it comes early and gets that much attention here? Is that part of the equation?
I hope so, but I think it really helps down ballot candidates because oftentimes what we see are that Council of State races. North Carolina is such a unique state, right? And we are one of very few states in the country that elect a Council of State, which is the top 10 executive offices that we have in North Carolina. It includes the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, and then also going down to your state auditor who now controls our state board of elections, right? It also includes our state treasurer and other entities that I think people oftentimes don't think about electing. But 22 statewide races, there's going to be ballot fatigue unless those candidates have the resources that they need to get out there and actually talk about their candidacy. And that also is the same thing for Republicans, right? You could make the case that would be advantageous to them down ballot too, and also the resources that would pour into the state. And especially if Republicans end up losing a Senate race in a primary with Phil Berger, they may need some help bringing in some more resources from what I'm hearing from reports coming out of them.
By the way, there's a new Front Porch Politics out on that race, just to give myself a little
plug there.
Plug here when we're here. You mentioned something interesting, and I know this is not related to this now, but you mentioned something interesting about a Carolinas primary. I have often wondered if a regional primary system made a lot of sense, both financially, but for the candidates too, and more states maybe getting a little more attention and just focusing on one area. Has that ever been talked about? Do you think that makes sense?
I mean, I look at the Carolinas primary just because of shared media markets. I think that if you're already going to be dipping into South Carolina, like if you're going to South Carolina as a candidate, there's no way that you're going to hit the upper part of South Carolina without hitting the Charlotte media market. And so bang for your buck, right? And North Carolina, right, also shares media markets with Tennessee, Georgia, and Virginia. And so to me, it's like if you're in this state, you're also in 5 other ones at the same time without even having to try to. And I think that's the best case scenario for why we also say, the Carolinas primary could be an idea, and it would also not negate the fact that South Carolina has been first in the nation, and we want to continue recognizing that Black voters in the South deserve that recognition.
Chris, I think you have to pick which region went first. That'd be a whole nother battle too, but that's for another Oprah. All right. I know you are very excited about this, and you think it makes all sense. Not everybody feels that way. You mentioned it earlier. You would need the Republican legislature to approve the change, essentially. How do you think you would do that? You've mentioned a few things here and there, but do you really think you could?
We're going to try, Tim Boyum. That's what I know. And hopefully we can make the case to them that for the state, economically, again, this is one of the best things that we can do for North Carolina. Des Moines alone, and the amount of times that he gets mentioned from the Iowa caucuses, it just nationally in and of itself brought in millions of dollars to that city in tourism. North Carolina has the opportunity to highlight so many different parts of our state that even, and especially Western North Carolina, when you think about how do you help places like Hurricane Helene hit, it recover faster. It's making sure that we're putting the national spotlight on them and we're never letting it leave. Because what's going to happen, and then what we knew happened, was that is a 10-year recovery period that we're seeing throughout Western North Carolina, maybe 30 recovery year period, depending on on how fast, right, federal funds are actually able to come into those communities. And we're not seeing them come in very quickly, right, thanks to our administration that's there right now. And I think that we have to look at how do we help people in every part of North Carolina take advantage of this and make it so that their small business, that their community gets the spotlight that they need from it. And I think that a lot of Republicans would find that advantageous right now, because many of them represent the communities that I think deserve that national recognition, and also the ability to bring tourism to North Carolina, because we are an ecotourism state, both on the eastern part of our state and the western part of our state. And I think that could really be a driver of our economy in the future.
How would you suggest then that it logistically would happen? Because I doubt the Republicans could convince the national Republicans to move theirs to the same date. So there would probably be two. Some suggest there may need to be three separate primaries, of course, with a runoff as well, potential runoff. And that costs a lot of money. How do you sort of work through those logistics?
Well, I mean, Republicans could decide that, right, whether or not they wanted to move up. North Carolina already has a shortened window for a primary schedule, and Republicans did move up our primary calendar beforehand, right, to be able to sort of be part of Super Tuesday during the 2020 primary schedule. So I don't think they're immune to it. And I think the bang for your buck of moving us up even a little bit more, if they were willing to do it then to be part of Super Tuesday in order to get that type of attention, why would you not move it up a month or two more to be able to get twice as much, if not three times as much of that attention, but also money and resources.
But do you think the national Republicans would let them do that?
I mean, I think Michael Whatley being in this state, being the former RNC chair, yeah, I think he sees the benefit of having his own state be part of the first in the nation. But you ask him, Tim.
I will. If he wants to come on, he's more than welcome to. So your suggestion would be sort of like an early January, both Republican and Democratic primary, and then also with all the down ballot races as well, and then a runoff later in the spring, if necessary?
If I had to have my preference, again, I am not in control of my state legislature, though, so I realize this is not the preference that maybe gets.
They're going to ask you these questions, though, I'm sure.
I'm sure. I mean, my preference would be to separate them. I think that you have the presidential primary first, and then you have a state primary afterwards that includes your down ballot races in it. And that also gives the time period for actually the incumbency or the incumbents to be challenged if people want to or whatnot, and sort of that time frame for a primary to play out. But I'm also not opposed to moving the entire thing up, to be honest with you. So whatever gets us to be part of that first and four, I'm down to do it.
So you think the economic benefits would more than pay for essentially what it would cost to have two elections, and it's worth it? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
All right. So the other thing that would do, which I think is interesting, would create a ridiculously long general election. What do you think the impacts of that would be? Obviously, it'd be more money, I guess, with money spent in the state.
Do we not already have enormously long general elections, Tim? I mean, how long have you been covering Roy Cooper and Michael Whatley in that case, sitting in that chair of yours?
Well, that's true. That's true.
I think that we're already a year out, right, from elections in some cases when they're happening. It's just, do you actually have the resources on the ground instead of just it being talked about in national media to put your footprint there? And I think that's the difference. It's like people have heard about a Senate race in North Carolina for a year now, right? And we've had the ground game to be able to meet that effort. I would love to see a presidential campaign who is out there talking to people both on airwaves or also on the ground in the state too, doing the same.
Do you fear at all that it would be confusing to have multiple primaries for voters?
I think that national media and my local media like you, Tim, are going to do such a good job at covering it that it's going to make it crystal clear to voters that there are two times that they need to come out and vote. And we're also going to have a great organized effort on the ground to help educate voters about that. Because I think what it's going to do is it's going to actually bring up consistency in voters across the state and make people want to turn out more so in primaries in North Carolina than they do regularly. Do
you get a sense, I'm going to move on to our last topic here in a minute, but do you get the sense that the party is ready to move on from some of those traditional Iowa, New Hampshire, and even South Carolina?
I think we're going to find out, and I'm going to make the best damn case that I possibly can for North Carolina to be part of it.
All right. Okay, so lawsuit, I believe there's a hearing today, in fact, about early voting locations. College Democrats of North Carolina are pushing against that. This is going to drop next Wednesday, so we'll see what happens if anything happens in between. But talk about this issue and why you're so concerned about it for folks that may not be paying super close attention.
So, for a little backstory for folks, right, in 2024, North Carolina Democrats broke the Republican supermajority that they had in the state House. And after that November election, what we saw Republicans do in our state legislature, instead of, to the point that I was making earlier, help Hurricane Helene victims and people that had been disproportionately affected by the worst natural disaster that we've ever seen taken over Western North Carolina, instead of giving grants to small business owners in Western North Carolina like they were asking for at that point in time, our state legislators went back and passed Senate Bill 382, which was a bill that stripped the governor of his ability to appoint state board of elections and county boards of elections members, and also stripped the attorney general of the ability to sue the state legislature over any bills that he deemed unconstitutional, even though he is your attorney, not theirs, right? And what happened after Senate Bill 382 passed is that the governor at that point in time, Roy Cooper, vetoed it. And unfortunately, because Josh Stein had not been, sworn in yet, and that the new legislators had not been sworn in yet, there was not a way to hold that veto. And so the veto got overridden. And what ended up happening was that Republicans took over control of the state board of elections. They moved the power from the governor to the state auditor in North Carolina. And our state auditor, right, decided that what he was going to task, Dave Bollick, decided he was going to task our state board of elections and our county boards of elections with was stripping voting sites off college campuses in North Carolina. The same thing that when Republicans had control of the state board of elections last time in 2016 under Pat McCrory, they also did at states or at schools like Appalachian and places like NC State and UNC Chapel Hill and elsewhere across the UNC system. And I remember that because I was a student at Appalachian State when that happened at that point in time and fought back against that voting site being taken off that campus then. And we still today are in that same fight that Republicans put us through in 2016 all over again. The fight to enfranchise voting rights for students across college campuses when they get taken away, thanks to Republicans having control of their county and their state boards of elections now.
And just to confirm what I'm pretty sure you're going to say, you believe that they're targeting it because college students are more likely to vote Democratic?
Absolutely.
So what is, I would assume some Republicans will say there's other early voting locations in town. Is it transportation, those kind of concerns, why you're fearful of this happening?
Western Carolina University in Jackson County is the most populated voting site and was the most used voting site during early voting in the 2024 election cycle. Republicans do not have the reasoning to take away these voting sites, and all they're using are excuses. For Eggers, who currently sits on the state board of elections, was also on the county board of elections at Appalachian State when I was there as a student. And his number one priority then was, again, disenfranchising young people from using their ability to vote. And if Republicans were not scared of young people using their ability to vote, they would put a college campus voting site across the entire state on every single one of them. And I think that they know that young people right now are fed up with this administration. They're scared and they're tired of seeing communities targeted, and they want to make sure that they actually have a future in the state that they deserve to live in right now. And Republicans are not offering that to anybody in North Carolina.
I feel like, a lot of people feel like they're consumed with politics around them at all times. You are. Are you able to break away from it? How do you stay sane?
I've got good friends that are not involved with politics at all who keep me sane. And I've got good family who tells me to quit this job almost every day to Boyum. So, they keep me humble in it all the time.
I've met your mom. Is she one of them?
Yeah. My dad, mostly, to be truthful with you, my dad's always like, Anderson, you're not going to do this again, right? But I think that they also know I've got a really big heart for it. And I think that people, especially with college students, right? A&T, our largest HBCU, is one of those campuses that was targeted by Republicans. And they're going to be doing a walk to the polls for early voting. So you're going to see students come out in droves. And I really think this is going to backfire on Republicans in a way that maybe they didn't necessarily anticipate. And our party is going to make sure that we help students get to the polls and have rides there as well. And we already know that there's been some great students that have taken the opportunity to get out there and organize that too on A&T's campus individually, because they also know that they've had a hard time to fight for the right to vote. So I think I keep going every day in this job because I have people around me who are also motivated and do that too. So we're lucky.
We're inundated with it here too. And I mean, the world's just crazy. So you got to have a passion for it to keep going for it. There's no question about that. So Anderson, thank you so much. It's good to see you as always.
Thank you.
If you want to keep up with what's happening in North Carolina politics and hear more conversations with people shaping our state and beyond, check out the Tying It Together YouTube channel in the description. Hit subscribe and let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, elections, and issues that matter to you.